On September 12th, 2001, Americans awoke to this headline. The paper said, quote, "Today we are all Americans." It was a show of solidarity and a reminder to Americans that they are not alone, and that they were not the first country to deal with terrorism, and that the face of what we were facing could only be described as evil, and in the face of that evil, we are truly all brothers and sisters. Over 20 years later, we watch a war in Ukraine. From the start, there were signs that this was not going to be your standard war. One of the first videos that we saw was of a father and son who, when driving down the road, encountered a Russian advance team some 500 yards ahead of them. Pulled over. They were civilians. It was obvious just by looking at them and their vehicle. They weren't sure what to expect. They really hadn't seen Russians or heard of the Russian army before. Their vehicle was then met with a hail of gunfire. Father got out of the vehicle and tried to run for it and was literally cut in half. The son managed to get out and make it to the woods where he hid for an hour, came back with the video still rolling to find his father now long dead. We saw a press team from Sky News reaching a checkpoint, their vehicles clearly marked as press, also coming under intense fire. Hunkered in the back seat, one of the reporters tried opening a door only to find the inside of that door sprayed with bullets. In the fog of war, mistakes do happen. On May 7th, 1999, the U.S. famously dropped 5 bombs on what we thought was a legitimate target in Yugoslavia. Turned out to be the Chinese embassy. But it quickly became clear here in Ukraine that these were not mistakes. These were not rogue elements of the Russian army, and they weren't miscommunications. They were orders. In the campaign of terror against Ukraine, we find mass graves of civilians, sometimes entire families, including children, their hands bound, having been tortured and executed. We've seen Russians shooting at civilians for sport, punishing civilians by targeting apartment complexes with tanks, missiles, and even just sprays of random gunfire. They've used hyperbaric weapons and cluster bombs in violation of international law. Humanitarian corridors established by the International Red Cross with in coordination with Ukraine and Russia for the sole purpose of getting women, children, and the elderly out of danger are targeted with devastating artillery fire, which they wait until the families are already down and heading through those corridors. The heads of civilians are literally being put on pikes, an unambiguous message that the Russians have no interest whatsoever in negotiating. And as Putin draws up even more soldiers, we learn that a majority of the soldiers that he's taking are being pulled from families in rural areas and areas that are more ethnically diverse. Those who are considered culturally pure have a little chance of getting called up, while those families from neighboring satellite countries are being called up and asked to fight in Ukraine. If the army wins, well, hey, Putin gets Ukraine. If they lose, Putin has ethnically cleansed Russia. Either way, he's happy. There's only one word for this. It's genocide. Today, we face a new terrorist organization, a new terrorist leader. His name is Vladimir Putin, and he runs one of the largest countries in the world, and he doesn't care even about the lives of his own people, let alone others. As we have, and we have Ukraine showing immense courage and bravery as they fight one of the largest countries in the world. We have seen in them the kind of courage and integrity that shows the best in all of us. Something most of us will only ever see once in a generation. And as if we have watched these people defend their homes, their friends, their family, their jobs, their livelihood, and their land from one of the largest terror organizations in the world. Today, we can say we are all Ukrainian. This is Overtime. My name is 𝐒𝐚𝐦𝐿. Welcome to Overtime. With me off camera are 𝐒𝐨𝐮𝐭𝐭𝐞 and Joe, and with me right down there is operator Starsky. All of you, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
All right, so we have I discussed a number of war crimes. Unfortunately, I'll quote the Catholic Church and say there have been so many war crimes that any reference to them must necessarily be summary. We have all of the information on that in our Discord. Come join us, and you can see how we put these shows together, see what we talk about. We're a community-driven channel, so you can even help run and choose the topics that we're going to talk about, but you can see all of the Ukrainian information there. Today, as all of these shows, Starsky will be back. He's agreed to do this weekly, which we sincerely appreciate, and so long as he is doing these shows, every one of these super chats and all donations are going straight to the organization of his choosing. That is linked at the bottom. So we are very, very happy to be able to do that. So with that said, Operator Starsky, welcome, and tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Good day. My name is Andrew, also known as Operator Starsky here in the internet. I'm a press officer working for the 4th Operative Brigade of the National Guard of Ukraine, also known as the Rapid Response Brigade of the National Guard of Ukraine. And it so happened that I became a blogger for the international community, reporting from Ukraine on this war.
So, all right. So you've been doing a lot of reporting and going on to blogs, YouTube channels. In fact, I met up with you on the shills. Are you going to be on the shills later this week? Are you going tomorrow?
Yes, sure. I'm reporting for the shills since probably April or May, probably like April, every single week. I think we became like a small family already. Always very happy to see them and you, of course, on their show.
I appreciate the offer to come by, and I come by every chance I get, which has been more often than not, which has been great. We have a link to that show down in the. We have a link to that show in the description. So having said that, what's been going on in Ukraine? We haven't had you on in a little bit. So if you could just fill us in with what's been going on for last week or so, I think that would help us out a lot.
Yeah, so there are 3 main topics that are most discussed in Ukraine.
All right.
Moving.
You there?
Hello, hello.
Oh, there you are. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back.
Yeah.
3 topics most discussed in Ukraine.
Yes. So one of them is Russians moving out of Kherson. Mm-hmm. They evacuated a bunch of their collaborationist like authorities, local authorities from Kherson. All of their civil military administrations are being evacuated. Also, we have information that Russians have mined the 𝐒𝐤𝐜𝐻𝐿𝐴 hydropower plant. And from what they're saying currently in Russian media, it's obvious that they are preparing to demolish it during their evacuation, during their retreat from Kherson, because they already blamed Ukraine that Ukraine will be destroying this dam. Of course, we are going to destroy our own dam. So that's one of the biggest concerns right now, and our president is doing everything to warn everybody that this may happen. We have information that Russians planted plenty of mines at this power plant yet in April when it was captured. And since then, basically, it was already mined because they expected the counteroffensive possibly. So we know that for sure. And the third topic that is broadly discussed in Ukrainian media currently is the situation with Iran. We know that the UK, Germany, and France called the UN to investigate this situation, to investigate the delivery of those Iranian drones to the Russian army, investigate their origin, and also investigate the possible channels used to deliver all the technologies, all the parts and microchips to Iran, because they can use those to build those drones, to build new sophisticated weapons. And it's very dangerous, not only for Ukraine, of course, but for other countries, including Israel, by the way. So that's one of the main topics. Yesterday, the defense counselor of Russian Federation was invited to Russian TV show, and because he didn't know that the microphone was on, he asked the host of the show not to ask him questions about Iranian drone, because he said everybody knows that the drones are Iranian, but our command prefers not to admit it. And now this video is viral, it's all over the internet. So basically, we all know the truth, and the only thing the UN should investigate is basically how to stop those parts necessary to build those drones from coming to Iran. Probably there will be new sanctions implemented against Iran. We will see. So those are three main topics that are being discussed widely today in Ukraine.
All right, marvelous. Thank you. I have a number of questions I'd like to ask, but Joe is on a limited time, got some limited time. So if he is still here, I haven't checked the, no, I think we lost him. All right. Yep, no, Joe is gone. So I will start with my questions. I'm gonna, well, okay. It's tough to know where to start. I want to start with Iran, but let's start with the evacuations. We'll get to Iran, but we'll do these in order. So, what purpose do you think has Russia been evacuating these people? And he's also Putin has declared martial law in a number of the illegally annexed territories. To what end do you think is he doing those evacuations, and has the martial law?
The martial law was implemented obviously because he wants again to spook everybody with his nukes, and we all know that he's not gonna do that. I'm more than sure, because whenever Russia says something, you gotta consider the opposite. It's proved many times already, and basically they're evacuating from Kherson because they understand that Ukrainian army is going to liberate this city very soon, and one of the crimes they already committed was they stole a lot of children from Kherson and brought them to Russia, which we consider deportation of ethnic group, basically, which is a war crime, of course. And we expect to take Kherson, the dynamic of our counteroffensive in this area, of course, now is a bit slower because they keep bringing their mobilized troops that don't play big role in this operation, but there's a lot of them, so we have to deal with them. And the same situation in Bakhmut, by the way, because they broadly use their mobilized troops as cannon fodder. They don't change much except for the time, probably the overall time of this of Ukrainian counteroffensive. So that's the question, I think. That's the answer, I think.
We've seen many times where Putin has attempted to get some kind of justification. He often says, we got to watch out because those crazy Ukrainians may attack Chernobyl, which, of course, if you did that, it would affect you guys far worse and far more than anyone else. But that was and then they did that with the other nuclear power. I don't know how to pronounce. How do I pronounce that? The other power plants, the largest power plant in Europe.
It's Zaporizhzhia.
Zaporizhzhia. Wow, I'm going to forget that one. I'm going to try that. Zaporizhzhia. I find it easier if I see it in Russian. At some point, I'll see it up in Russian, and then I can pronounce it. All right. So we've seen them do that before. We know that they have mined that dam. If they detonate it, that is yet another war crime. That's extraordinarily illegal. What are going to be the consequences for Ukraine if they detonate that dam?
Huge consequences, not only for Ukraine, but for all the countries surrounding the Black Sea, because it means that around 18 millions of cubic meter of water will be released. Actually, it also means that their water supply to Crimea will stop big time, but who cares about Crimea? A big part of Kherson, of course, will be flooded, but also it's gonna have disastrous consequence for countries like Bulgaria, Turkey, even I think Georgia.
All right, so two major problems initially. Lack of water. You're going to have a hard time getting water to Ukrainians, and flooding of civilian areas. Isn't that dam also a major supplier of cooling water to the nuclear power plant?
From what I know, yes. There is a channel around this nuclear power plant in Zaporizhzhia used to cool the water, that is in turn used to cool the reactors, and basically it can also damage the power station. I'm not sure if it's still operational in terms of because it's been hit. I mean, it's power stations that are located on a distance from the very nuclear power plant. Those are hit. Also, we know that power plant is being controlled by Russians. So sometimes those reactors are being detached from the grid because of numerous problems appearing almost every day. And this, of course, can have big negative consequence regarding the power plant, because it puts the whole the whole Zaporizhzhian power plant under danger. We know that because we lived next to Chernobyl for 30 years, we know that you should not play with nuclear energy. it always ends bad. Russians don't know it, and we hope that the UN will help us in this regard.
Well, my feeling is, unfortunately, that they're actually reasonably well aware. They just don't care. So we talked briefly before you came on about your power problems, because, of course, if you lose power, you may not be able to connect to the show. That's been a huge change recently. Your president and the power companies have asked you to conserve power. There have been significant power problems in Ukraine. What is the power situation like, and why?
So the situation is following. We had about 30% of our power plants and power stations damaged by Russian missile strikes, which does not change anything in military regard whatsoever. Basically, why people should preserve energy right now at this point in Ukraine is because of civilian needs. Army doesn't need energy. The army doesn't need to be charged and plugged into the power grid at all, because they have their generators. They produce electricity themselves. The attack that was launched against Ukrainian civilian infrastructure is a pure terrorist act. And the only reason why it was done, because Russia loses on the front line, and they only want to show to their internal audience, to Russian citizens, that something is being done to Ukrainians, because Russians celebrate every time there are missile strikes launched against.
All right,
we show Russians.
We had lag spike there.
Yes,
you're back.
Yeah, and those strikes were basically launched to show Russians that Ukrainians also suffer. So nothing is that bad in Russia. On Russian side, Ukrainians also suffer, so it's okay.
And those strikes also included apartment complexes, civilian infrastructure other than electrical, but also like a well-known like civilian bridges and stuff like that. Is that correct?
Yes, it's true. Last week we had one of the biggest missile strikes on Ukrainian cities. Something more than 80 cruise missiles were launched. And they were specifically targeting, during this first strike, they were specifically targeting different civilian structures and objects like playgrounds. By the way, the playground that was hit by Russian cruise missile was repaired today. Mayor 𝐒𝐤𝐿𝐴 already reported on that today, and posted pictures and video from the children playground. That was basically considered a military target by Russians, because all Ukrainians are their military targets and their enemies, and they don't care. The office with there was this business center in the downtown with offices of Samsung and Microsoft. It was also hit by a missile, of course. And the funniest thing was that the only bridge in Kiev that doesn't cross the river, it goes along the river, was also targeted by a Russian missile, and they missed. So it was absolutely useless, but again, it was just a pure terrorist act that was committed against Ukrainian civilians. Nobody can deny it, absolutely, because 0 military objects were destroyed during this strike. And we can see that Russians deliberately target civilian objects and residential buildings and power stations, but Ukrainian army doesn't suffer from that whatsoever.
Reports are that they've used or don't have access to from decay. They haven't taken care of their weapons, but reports are that they've used up or have lost 50 to 80% of their missile stocks and drones and other more highly advanced so-called reasonably highly advanced weaponry, and they the purpose of the sanctions, among other things, aside from trying to apply pressure, was to prevent them from being able to get other weapons, including the so-called suicide drone, the attacks of which can be absolutely devastating. They have found a way around those sanctions in a new ally. Could you tell us a bit about that, please?
Yes, of course. So the most recent information that we have on that is that Iran is going to sell Russia their new ballistic missiles that have range between 300 and 700 kilometers. Currently, Russians are using Iranian-made kamikaze drones. They also use those strike drones that can be, they're called 𝐒𝐤𝐿, and they can be used both for reconnaissance and for attack operations. They also carry something like 10 kilograms of explosives. That's why they can also be used as kamikaze drones, but not as effective as their 𝐒𝐤𝐜𝐻-136 drones, which it's so funny, you know. Ukrainian army captured one of those 𝐒𝐤𝐻-6 drones completely intact because one of our soldiers shot its engine and it landed in the sea. So it's almost completely intact, and we towed this drone to the shore, made plenty of images and videos of this drone, and it's so funny that all of its stickers, because if you compare this drone to the Iranian exhibition of those drones in Tehran, for example, where you can see them clearly with Iranian flags and stuff like that. So those flags and stickers were removed, but those drones contain a lot of different like titles and descriptions, you know, made in English with mistakes, and same thing with those kamikaze drones, because they contain both text in English and big titles in Russian language. For example, every drone contains this huge sticker saying 𝐍𝐢𝐜𝐻𝐿, as if screaming, "Look, this drone was born in Russia. It's not Iranian." And the same time, it contains some text in English language, and its circuits, some of its circuits contain text in Farsi on them, some description of those parts.
Farsi is a second language in Russia. I mean, everyone there speaks Farsi, but anyways.
Yeah, of course, and English is third language.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, I saw a lot of Russian-made weapons. I don't remember any of those weapons having like titles or text on it in English or in Farsi. Usually, it's just Russian.
This bomb is most certainly not from Iran. Please disregard. Oh, dear Lord. Well, I thought you were going to... Let me. I'm sorry. I just want to interrupt for 1 second. There was a footage I saw earlier of the Ukrainians had captured a drone, and they took the thing apart, and it was basically held together with duct tape and baling wire, and they actually had like the camera on the thing was like a old Nikon, and it was just like well, how the hell are they? Anyways, please continue. I apologize.
Yeah. So. The United Nations yesterday, the United Nations decided to bring their investigators to Ukraine and investigate everything about those drones. Russians went furious. They said that in case this happens, in case United Nations investigators arrive to Ukraine, Russia will reassess their cooperation with the United Nations, which is like, I mean, it's like in the kindergarten, you know. I want to tell you two things, Mom. I didn't steal chocolate. That's first. Second, don't come into my room. It's like that.
Yeah.
I do have a bit of a question on that. You had mentioned that that you had gone and lodged protests with the, or Ukraine had gone and lodged protests with the United Nations about Iran supplying drones to Russia. From a completely, I can understand why you wouldn't want them to do this. From an outside perspective, what is the difference between Iran giving drones to or selling drones to Russia versus, say, almost all of the West supplying military equipment to Ukraine to fight the war? What were the grounds for the complaint of Iranian drones being sold to Russia?
It's very easy. First of all, Russia invaded Ukraine, not vice versa.
Correct.
And they violated every single act signed by Putin, by the way, Putin himself. In 2003, he signed the Act of Recognition Ukrainian and Russian borders, for example. And 18 years later, he changed his mind. You know, it happens. Same with Iran, because prior to all those sanctions that were placed on Russia, Iran was the most sanctioned country in the world. And the reason for that was because Iran was recognized as a regime that supports terrorism. That's why they had so many sanctions placed on them. And by trading with Russia, and basically by producing those drones, Iran also violates a lot of agreements, and one of agreements being violated is their nuclear agreement. So basically, that's the reason. Yes, Russia attacked Ukraine. Yes, West provides Ukraine with weapons, which is logical, because if you invade other country, violating all kinds of law, international legislation and stuff, you have to die. And that's why Ukraine receives all of those anti-air measures and artillery systems and tanks and rifles.
So essentially the grounds are Russia and Iran are violating sanctions and agreed upon more or less treaties that they had previously signed, agreements that they had previously agreed to.
Yeah, absolutely, because we all have rules. International relations, international cooperation, living in a country surrounded by other countries requires both sides to stick to some kind of rules, laws. That's why when you violate those laws, when you invade other countries, sorry, but you have to die, I think, unless you change your mind. That's logic.
Okay, I was just wondering what the actual what the protest was citing as grounds for it. Thanks.
So we're going to be having on next week a journalist from Iran. She is exiled in the U.S. during these protests. We're gonna discuss what's going on there. But given everything that's going on in Iran right now, which is as bad as I think it was '79 when they had the last regime change, and that really started when the workers themselves started getting into the protests, and especially the University of Tehran, which usually stays out of these kinds of things, but has now entered this one. Given all that's going on, and that Iran, A, seems to have enough difficulties as it is, and B, was actually in negotiations with the United States to restart their nuclear deal. Why would they help Russia at this point, do you think?
Because it's very hard to tell from the standpoint of a leader of a terrorist regime, which is Khamenei. So Russia promised Iran technology, like from our information that we have, Russia promised Iran technologies regarding their modern fighter jets, airplanes. They offered Iran, of course, money, revenue for those drones, for ballistic missiles and stuff. I expected Khamenei to be more wise, because after placing all those sanctions on Russia, Iran had every opportunity to remove all its own sanctions and to reintegrate with international community by simply trading with Europe, offering their resources to Europe. They have plenty of oil that nobody wants to buy because they're under sanctions, and they could have plenty of sanctions removed. They could become richer, basically. Their people could become richer. Currently, poverty is a big problem in Iran. People cannot buy apartment because they're too expensive, and they don't have enough money to buy those. That's why plenty of people are not satisfied with Khamenei's regime, of course. But they decided to go other way, and they decided to accept this offer from Putin. Again, I would say that because I know how FSB works, which is basically how KGB worked, probably they could have something on Khamenei as well. It's very hard to, when FSB wants to recruit you, they will do everything, and it's very hard to avoid that. So maybe that was the reason why Khamenei agreed. Another reason maybe is because I don't know. I'm not a terrorist. It's very hard to answer this question from this standpoint.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I honestly, I would have understood it either before the war or 10 years ago, when Russia was not seen as so much as a paper tiger. But I think it's certainly worthy of discussion, something we'll keep an eye out for. So I'm going to ask Xander if he's got any follow-up questions. I also want to remind people right now, too, that we have a Discord. We have all the information from these shows and others on that Discord. We also discuss philosophy, politics, gaming. We've got channels for just about all of it. So I hope you guys will come down and check that out. It's also the best way to, if you like, subscribe, and share. If you like this program and like what we do here, one of the easiest ways to support us without having to go to Patreon. You can always do that too, but one of the easiest ways is to simply like, subscribe, and share the show with people that you think would enjoy it. It always helps us out a lot, so we appreciate that. Yeah, we do have the last that we had, and this is in the breaking news channel. It's from several hours ago. Is that 10 Iranians were I forget whether they were killed or captured, but believed to be in one way or another decidedly detained in the fighting in Ukraine. And then we don't know. I know very little about that yet, but obviously we have to keep an eye on that. Russia has been flirting with, and we've got this on the Discord too, but they've been flirting with U.S. naval ships. The commander of CENTCOM has now boarded a submarine in the area, and that is seen as an attempt to send a message to the Russians that we are taking this very seriously. And we did hit that. By the way, we did hit that Chinese embassy. So you got to be a little careful when you're shooting around other countries, because that kind of thing can happen and things can escalate quickly. So Putin is unhinged at this point. 𝐶𝐸𝐬𝐴ndering, any final thoughts or questions?
Well, I have a little bit more experience with the U.S. naval forces, and if they're able to take down one of the larger Russian ships with essentially drones and targeting, they don't want to mess with the U.S. military. So he would be a complete fool to keep pushing the U.S. military or the U.S. Navy. They would probably sink all of their ships without ever knowing who shot the shots. So the attack submarines that we have are quite vicious and hard to detect. So as you guys have been making quite a lot of advancements recently, do you have a comprehensive, I hate to say comprehensive, do you have a generalized plan of what all of the goals are, what you're looking to accomplish? Is it just getting the Russian troops out? Are you going to try and take back Crimea and restore the borders originally and then stop and hold there? Kind of what does the end game look like for you? Because it actually looks like you can get there. So I'm just curious, what are you actually shooting at accomplishing?
It's been announced by our president already. It's returning to the borders of 1991, which were the same as in 2013, basically. It's to remove all the, delete, so to say, all the Russian troops on the territory of Ukraine, and return our territories. We don't want to take our territories back, and we want to make sure that Russia is not gonna attack Ukraine ever again. And of course, we want to punish all of the war criminals responsible for all of those deaths and all the destruction. Our Ukrainian energy company already said that they prepared a very, very big bill for Russia that they will receive very soon. As for 10 Iranians, I suspect that it's actually a repost of the news that I saw in September, probably. So in the village of 𝐒𝐚𝐦𝐿, it's in Kherson, due to HIMARS strike on this village, something like 20, I don't remember exact numbers, 20 or 30 Russian drone operators and 10 Iranian instructors were eliminated.
That was it.
Probably, yes, probably it's just a repost of the old news. I think so.
I suspect you're right. That sounds right. All right. Thank you for clarifying. No, I think you got it. I think you're right. All right. 𝐶𝐸𝐬𝐴ndering, anything else?
I guess my other thing is do you have an approximate time frame? You realize you can't give like exact numbers to where you think you can accomplish your goals. Are we talking 6 months, a year? What do you think it would take to get Russia out of Ukraine?
It depends. Unfortunately, I cannot tell you much from my level. I don't have access to the information that my command has, so I cannot tell you precisely about the timeframes. We'll never know until we see.
I think it may also depend on, I mean, yeah, there's so many factors at this point, because if Putin, there was an unconfirmed report that Putin had essentially started the deployment of tactical nuclear devices to the Ukraine region, and what ended up happening was his inner circle said, no, we're not there yet. They didn't say no, never, but they said, no, we're not there yet. Now, that's an unconfirmed report. We have that source in the Discord, and you can check it and evaluate it as you see fit. But, if he tries to use chemical weapons, if he inadvertently strikes a U.S. or any kind of NATO, things could change dramatically. All right, well, just as a reminder, so tomorrow you're going to be on with the shills, is that right?
Yes, it's right. I will be with the shills at 10 p.m. Kiev time.
All right, we've got a link to that in the description below, so I hope you guys will check that out. That's where I met Starsky, and I try to drop by there. They've been very generous and allowed me to come by anytime I want. It's been marvelous. I've enjoyed my time there, so thank you all for that. Any final thoughts, Operator Starsky, before we leave?
So currently I receive a lot of commentaries from Russian bots, obviously trying to convince other people that Ukraine is not worth fighting for. It's worth to abandon Ukraine in order to save the US, European countries, and stuff like that. I just want people to realize that Ukraine at this point is their only protection against Russian terrorism, and it's the only country actually physically fighting against Russian terrorism. And if Ukraine is defeated, your house will be next. Everybody should clearly understand that and have no illusions about good Russian bear, because it's nothing like that. It's a terrorist state that is dreaming of destroying the US, reclaiming Alaska, and destroying democracy all around the world, because democracy is alien to Russian terrorist regime. So don't have illusions about it, and keep supporting Ukraine, because it's the right cause. And here in Ukraine, we all appreciate your support. We all feel it, and not only from the humanitarian and military aid that we receive, but also from your commentaries in the internet, all of your supportive words for Ukrainian soldiers and Ukrainian civilians. And I would like to say big thanks to everybody who supports Ukraine.
Certainly on behalf of everyone here at In Time, I wish we didn't have to do it, but since it does need to be done, we are honored and privileged, I think, to be able to do that. I'd like to add one other thing. For me, I've always been involved politically. I've worked on a number of presidential campaigns, and I enjoy that kind of work. Keeping Americans in particular interested in Ukraine has not always been easy, and I go into Discords and I get into debates or on Twitter about the subject, and that's for me the lowest common denominator. Where do you think Putin is going next? And last time there was a war in Europe, it was a problem, and it works, and people listen to that, and it's true. So it's a real easy one to use. But I wanted to say I meant what I said at the beginning of this show. Aside from those practical concerns, it's been amazing to watch the Ukrainian military. The definition of grace under pressure, and not just the military, but their civilians who are putting up with some of the worst atrocities we've seen in this century, and who are facing an enemy who, as it turns out, is as terrible, I think, as Adolf Hitler certainly was. He has not yet had the ability to do what Hitler did, but I think he absolutely would if he could. And that's why we outlined just the beginning of the genocide that he has been committing. And in the face of that kind of evil, it is so easy to lose hope, and it is so easy to feel alone, and it's so easy to feel like that's all there is in this world. And when I look at the people of Ukraine, yourself included, but also a great many more I've had contact with, I see people who are filled with this fierce determinism that makes me proud to be a human being in a way that Russia strips from me. So it's an inspiration to watch you and your people, and we all pray for you every single night. And this is coming from an atheist. So please stay as safe as you can. Thank you very much for coming, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you so much, bro.
Have a good night.
Yeah, bye-bye.